And hello, Savannah, Georgia. Hi, this is Julia M. Spencer. You're listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. Thanks for tuning in to my show here. Today on a Wednesday afternoon, you're listening to Real Estate Real Talk, where we talk about anything and everything related to real estate, and specifically real estate investing. I have a bunch of good stuff here lined up for you all. And today's show, we're going to be talking about real estate contracts. I'm going to start you off today with basically an example of what has happened to me in the last couple of weeks here, and kind of like something to teach you what you shouldn't do if you have real estate and you're trying to invest. So here's kind of what happened, and I want to talk about contracts, real estate contracts specifically. I recently purchased a tax sale foreclosure right here in Chatham County, and this is something that you should not do. So listen up if you're an investor or you into tax sale foreclosure investing. So what happened is I purchased this home about a year and a half ago, well, maybe about a year and a half ago almost, here in Chatham County. And after the redemption period, of course, we did a couple more legal things, cleaned it up a little bit. Now it's up for sale. And of course, a lot of demand for very cheap properties, fixer-uppers basically is what I sell. And one of the investors from Atlanta came and was really actually made me a contract before he even saw the property, which was kind of weird already. But then they did come, introduced themselves first off as a homeowner that just wanted to get a rental for themselves. Then, though, the real truth basically came out, and they said that they're a wholesaler. They're just going to resell the property to another investor with adding a little bit of extra money on top of it. And which was fine by me as long as I got my asking price. And of course, negotiations went on fiercely for a little while. And finally, he presented me with a contract. After a couple of things back and forth, I was fine with the contract. We signed it. And in the contract, it stated that he had 30 days to close. So mind you, when you're on a contract to sell some real estate, you can't, you're kind of tied up on that contract. So you can't just... If somebody comes along and says, hey, I want to offer you more than what it says on your contract, you can't just go and say, okay, well, this previous contract is null and void. I'm going to go with this new offer now. You can't do that. So basically, I had this contract and I was waiting. I had 30 days because they had 30 days to close, and they were pushing it to the very last day. And upon, I think it was maybe like a week before the last day of the expiration of the contract, I contacted the buyer and I said, hey, what's the deal? I don't have any details on closing. Where's the attorney's office that I need to go to? Do I need to prepare some paperwork myself, or what are we going to do? And the buyer said, well, I haven't found a rebuyer, the next buyer. I haven't found an investor in the last 3 weeks. So I think the deal is going to fall through. And I'm like, well, that's not very cool to say it the nice way. I didn't say it that nice. I say it nice here in the air, but you should have told us that, a long time ago, because I could have been actively recruiting different buyers here. And he said, well, I'm really sorry. I'm going to still try. Can we extend the contract for another 30 days? And at this point, I said, no, we can't. If you find a buyer, you can close within a week, and then we'll write a new contract. But in the meantime, our old contract is null and void if you don't close it by that date that it says on there, and we're pretty much done. Now, my mistake here in all of this, dear listeners in Savannah, was that I actually signed a contract with a consideration of $10. What does that mean? So every real estate contract out there, you have to provide some sort of consideration. A minimum amount that you have to basically put down that kind of secures the contract in place, I guess. And a lot of times people, when they purchase a home, it's about $500. Sometimes it's $1,000. Sometimes it's more. It just depends. But $500 is kind of the minimum. And my mistake in this case was that I accepted a contract for $10. And they never even gave me the $10 even. So the contract was null and void to begin with. But that was my big mistake here, and didn't think about it. But the buyers had actually no incentive whatsoever to close on this contract, to actually fulfill the contract or their terms of the contract, because they only had $10 to lose if they didn't. And they didn't even give me the $10 to begin with. So they had nothing to lose. They could just extend the contract to eternity. And I guess they read some really good real estate investing books. They weren't mine, obviously, but I learned my lesson really good. And this is something that I really want to emphasize to everybody that's listening, real estate investors out there, or people that want to get into tax sale foreclosure investing, or anybody else out there. If you write contracts, to make sure to write the consideration for at least $500. That's kind of like the going number. And if you're working with a real estate agent, they're going to advise you of that anyways. You don't have to remember that on your own if you're doing this. If you're working on your own, of course, for sure, I would maybe pre-write some contracts for about $500 consideration and actually collect that money too from the buyers. Make sure you hold that $500 in your pocket. And that gives them a sort of an incentive to actually really fulfill the terms of this contract that are theirs. And if they don't, then you get to keep the $500 for yourself, which is kind of like wasted time payment, I guess you could say. And even then, it might not be quite fair, but it's better than getting nothing for waiting around for 30 days for somebody to buy this property. You could have sold it to somebody else by now. So that's kind of my introduction to today's show. We're going to be talking about contracts for the next half hour. And I'm going to give you a couple more tips about contracts and how to negotiate contracts and how to make an offer and things like that. So when it comes to buying things, most Americans are lousy negotiators. Can you agree with that? I mean, I definitely can. Negotiation isn't part of our culture. We've been conditioned for generations to be docile buyers, to pay whatever price is marked on a can of beans or a TV set. Instead of negotiating with someone eyeball to drive down the price, at best, we comparison shop to find a store with the lowest price, and in my case, I am time-starved, so I don't even do that. So sure, we can negotiate when our back is to the wall. We haggle over expensive things like cars, and we also haggle with the boss for a raise, but doing so makes us uncomfortable. We walk away from these encounters with the nagging suspicion that we came out on the short end of the deal, that someone else could have done better. So realizing our nation's discomfort with negotiation, some car dealers have taken the haggling out of buying a car, and so instead of using high-pressure sales tactics, these dealers post a sale price on the car, the no haggling sticker basically, and that's the price, take it or leave it. If you take it, you probably won't get the lowest price, but some people think that's a fair trade-off in order to avoid the unpleasantness of negotiating. And we're talking about real estate here, so you won't find a no haggling sticker on a home. On the contrary, generally, everything from the purchase price to the date that escrow closes is negotiable. So given today's high home prices, as most of the densely populated parts of the United States, buying a home is the ultimate in high-stakes negotiating. So good negotiators come out of a home purchase smiling, bad negotiators take it in the wallet. So this is actually very true. And let me just share a little bit of an experience I've had long ago trip to China. And this was part of a business school trip for 3 weeks to China. And our goal, it was a Master's of Business Administration program that I went with my class. And the goal of our educators was to introduce us to how business is done in China. I mean, we saw a lot of different businesses. We're invited to a lot of presentations. We've been to the Coca-Cola factory there, a couple of other factories in Tianjin, which is close to Beijing, and some of the really high industrialized areas there for production manufacturing. But the one thing that I walked away from with this trip was the fact that I know nothing, basically, about negotiating. And that didn't come from the presentations or any of the formal programming that we had to attend during that trip. That came from us going out on our own and just trying to buy souvenirs. I remember very specifically, we actually were sent to a mall there. And the malls in China are not like, or at least the one that I went to, was not anything like I've ever seen. For starters, this mall was 5 stories. And every area that you could go to was for a specific type of item. So on the first floor, you would only find shoes. On the second floor, it was only purses and bags and things like that. On the third floor, it'd be home items, home accessories and baby stuff and stuff like that. And then on the fourth floor, you find clothes or things like that. Now, China doesn't have any specific laws against copyright, so all brand names that you can think of anywhere in the world are copied in China and you can buy them there. Not really supposed to legally be allowed to import them to the United States because we do have anti-copyright laws here, but they don't apply, obviously, for items that are made in China and just bought there and consumed or used there. So you find a lot of brand name accessories and things like that are not really from that manufacturer. They're just basically copies. And you basically, now there's a lot to see, and there's a lot of really good items, and there are a lot of quality levels. So, but nothing had any price tags anywhere. So whenever we go out, us Americans, 2 or 3 of us together, usually in a group, and we would try to negotiate anything, we were basically quoted a price. And what I've learned very quickly during that trip is that normally the Chinese would go for a price, they would settle on a price and accept a price that's about a third of the first price they told you for any specific item. So anything that they said, take a third of that, and then you probably will get that price eventually. Of course, in the interest of negotiating, you have to offer them a lot less, so maybe a tenth. So I'm going to just give you an example. For example, let's say I wanted to buy a purse. And first price that they said was, okay, this purse is $20. And the first thing that you would say, no, I will only pay $2. I'll pay $2. And so that was my lowest end, and that was their highest end. And this is where we're going to somewhere settle on a price between 20 and 2, and we would just go back and forth. And I found very quickly that the Chinese were willing to settle for about a third of their initial price. So that would have been about $7 for this particular item, right around $7 or so. And I applied that technique to everything else I bought, and it worked beautifully because that's exactly you had to learn very quickly. And here's something else I learned on that trip. Me being, of course, an American now, naturalized here for many, many years. A lot of my classmates are from the United States and from the South here, actually, specifically. The college that I went to is based out of Macon, Georgia. And yeah, I can say the name of my college. It was Wesleyan College here in Macon, Georgia. I'm an alumni. And this trip was maybe like 15 years ago. It was a long time ago. But I did find that a lot of the Americans that were on a trip with me had a lot of difficulty with standing in front of the Chinese, looking them in the eye, and making very, very feisty demands on price reductions. And the Chinese had no problems with this whatsoever. Even if you said, okay, this is too much, I'll walk away, they'll physically grab you by the arm and pull you back into the store. I mean, there was a lot of very close encounters, I should say. And that's just really not in our culture here in the United States. We don't negotiate. And it's a shame, really, because it's a shame if you're on the winning end of the deal. But if you're on the losing end of the deal, it's a shame because you could have saved yourself a lot of money. And that very much applies to home buying. Real estate specifically, everything's negotiable and services are negotiable. And I've learned this very quickly to not take anything personal and have any kind of expectations about price reductions or anything like that. So if you don't know how to negotiate, you're going into a deal for a house, then make sure you get yourself a real estate agent or somebody that can help you with this, because you're going to need those people to get the best price for you. Let's talk a little bit more about contracts here. Actually, this show is probably more about emotions and coping with your emotions and negotiating. You're listening to Real Estate Real Talk, and today we're talking about contracts, real estate contracts, and negotiation. And one kind of precedes the other, but it's very important to write very good contracts. So I'm going to talk really briefly here in the last couple minutes about how to negotiate with finesse, and also the 3 things that good offers have in common. Skillful negotiators get what they want through mutual agreement, not brute force. Brute force is crude, rude, ugly, and decidedly unfriendly. And this actually goes for everything. If you go to court and have a dispute, I would call that brute force. I always believe in talking out things and coming to a mutual agreement first before forcing somebody to agree to something they may not want to agree to. So here are some concepts that you may find useful for negotiating with finesse. First off, phones are for making appointments only. Never, never, never let your agent or lawyer present an offer or attempt to negotiate significant issues over the phone. Saying no over the phone is too easy for the sellers. Even if they agree with everything you want, they may change their minds by the time they actually have to sign the contract. Second, oral agreements are also useless. In our society, we have written contracts because people have notoriously selective memories. If you want your deal to be enforceable in a court of law, put everything about it in writing. Get into the habit of writing short, dated MFRs, memos for record, of important conversations too, such as, for example, June 2nd, lender said we'd get 7.5% mortgage rate. June 12th, seller wants to extend close of escrow a week, and so on. Put these notes in your transaction file just in case you need to refresh your memory. Heed the immoral word of Samuel Goldwyn: a verbal agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on. And I agree with that full-heartedly. So another thing about negotiating with finesse is deadline management is essential. Real estate contracts are filled with deadlines for things like contingency removals, deposit increases, and, of course, the date of the close of escrow, which is basically when the contract is completed. Failure to meet deadlines can have dreadful consequences. Your deal could fall apart. You could even get sued. Most deadlines, however, are flexible if you handle them correctly. Good advice here. And suppose that you just found out that completing the property inspections will take longer than anticipated. Immediately contact the sellers to explain the reason for the delay, and then get a written extension of the deadline. Reasonable delays can usually be accommodated if properly explained and promptly handled. And that last example has happened to me many times, especially if we're dealing around a calendar that has holidays or weekends. And the sellers are usually, or all parties, sellers and buyers, are very agreeable to changes in schedule that are explainable. Now let's talk about a couple of things that good offers have in common. This might be a good introduction here for you to write your next contract to buy a real estate purchase here soon. Good offers are based upon the seller's most important concern, a realistic offering price. So you shouldn't pull the offering price out of thin air. Instead, base your offering price on houses comparable to the seller's house in age, size, condition, and location that have sold within the past 6 months in that same area. All sellers' asking prices are a fantasy, and actual sales prices of comparable houses are facts. So focus on the facts and base your offering price on that. That's a good advice to some of the people that tried to buy some of my houses here in the last couple of weeks. Look at comparable house deals there, and don't just pull numbers out of the head according to what is in your wallet. Hint, hint. So another good offer is good offers have realistic financing terms. Now, your mortgage interest rate, loan origination fee, and time allowed to obtain financing, explained in the contingencies, which I'm going to talk a little bit later, must be based upon current lending conditions. Some offers get blown out of water because a buyer's loan terms are unrealistic, so focus again on the facts. If you've been pre-qualified, or better yet, pre-approved for a loan, you or your agent should stress that advantage when you present your offer. This proves to the sellers that you're a credit-worthy buyer who's ready, willing, and financially able to purchase their home, and also worthy of negotiating with, basically. Good offers, of course, last thing here that a good offer has in common. Good offers don't expect a blank check from the sellers. Unless property defects are glaringly obvious, neither you nor the sellers will know whether any corrective work is needed at the time that your offer is initially submitted. Under these circumstances, it's smart to use property inspection clauses, and that enable you to reopen negotiations regarding any necessary corrective work after you receive the inspection reports. Now remember, negotiation is an ongoing process. After the action of having your offer accepted, your property inspectors gather information. After they've determined that it's actually required in the ways of corrective work, you and the sellers can renew your negotiations, armed with the facts, which is the information from the inspectors. This sequence beats wasting time and energy by arguing with the sellers about the cost to complete corrective work before any of you know the precise number of dollars needed to do the repairs. Again, focus on the facts. Good advice. Now, if the sellers agree with the price and terms contained in your offer, they'll sign it. Their agent should give you a signed copy of the offer immediately. When you actually receive a copy of the offer signed by the sellers, you have what's called a ratified offer, and that is a signed or accepted offer. This doesn't mean that you own the house, that it has been sold. All it says that you now can say that the sale is pending. Again, good advice, how to write a good offer, how to negotiate. My information today came from my handy accompanying book here, Home Buying for Dummies, 3rd edition by Eric Tyson and Ray Brown, that I kind of pick apart. Have been picking apart for the last couple months. Here I'm presenting you some of the information. And I hope you found the information on today's show informative and interesting. As you know, I have a very active YouTube channel with a lot of videos. For information, you can go there, Julia M. Spencer. I'm going to be out for the rest of the day. My hour is up. I'm so sad to leave. I hope you can make it a point to donate to WRUU today, as we're an all-volunteer staff here. I hope you enjoyed my show there today, and I hope it was informative. Tune in again on Wednesdays. My show is always on Wednesdays at noon till 1 o'clock, 12 to 1. And Real Estate Real Talk, Julia M. Spencer. It was a pleasure to have you here on my show today. Thanks for tuning in.
For your free guide to real estate investing, visit juliamspencer.com.